Good evening, Holt Public. I'd like to welcome you to the Holt Public Behavior, Discipline, and Policy Summit. I hope to share some information with you tonight that may be useful, as well as respond to some of the questions that were submitted through the Google form. To that end, not all questions will be answered, and I hope to keep you no longer than 59 minutes this evening. So here we go. I appreciate you joining us. Jamie Vollmer once said in his book, Schools Cannot Do It Alone, that no generation of educators in the history has been asked to do what Americans now demand of their public schools. Each year, the burden grows, and each day, millions of teachers and administrators give everything they've got to meet the challenge. Their record of achievement is remarkable. With that, you've heard me say for years that we are better together, and that it will take each of us to make a difference for all of us. We firmly believe that schools cannot do it alone. Vollmer is better known for his blueberry story, and it goes something like this. If I ran my business the way you people operate your schools, I wouldn't be in business very long. Now let me set the stage. That was the first quote. Vollmer was asked to do a keynote engagement. He was the lead speaker for a school district somewhere in the nation. And that this is part of his remarks that day. He goes on and he says, I stood before an auditorium filled with outraged teachers who were becoming angrier by the minute. My speech had entirely consumed their precious 90 minutes of in-service. Their initial icy glares had turned to restless agitation, and you could cut the hostility with a knife. Vollmer represented a group of business people dedicated to improving public schools. He was an executive at an ice cream company that had become famous in the mid-'80s when People magazine chose their blueberry ice cream as the best ice cream in America. Vollmer firmly believed that public schools needed to change, that they were archaic in selecting and sorting, and they were designed for an industrial age and out of step with the needs of an emerging knowledge society. He believed schools needed to look to business. They, of course, knew how to produce quality, zero defects, total quality management, and continuous improvement. In retrospect, he said, the speech was perfectly balanced, equal parts ignorance and arrogance. As soon as he finished, a woman's hand shot up. She appeared polite and pleasant. She was, in fact, a razor-edged veteran high school English teacher who had been waiting to unload. She began quietly. We are told, sir, that you manage a company that makes good ice cream. Vollmer replied, the best ice cream in America. How nice, she said. Is it rich and smooth? 16% butterfat, Vollmer responded. Premium ingredients, she inquired. Super premium, nothing but AAA. Vollmer was on a roll. He never saw the next line coming. Mr. Vollmer, she said, leaning forward with the wicked eyebrow raised to the sky, when you're standing on the receiving dock and you see an inferior shipment of blueberries arrive, what do you do? In the silence of the room, he could hear the trap snap. He was dead meat, but he wasn't going to lie. And Vollmer said he would send them back. She jumped to her feet. That's right, she barked. And we never send back our blueberries. We take them big, small, rich, poor, gifted, exceptional, abused, frightened, confident, homeless, rude, and brilliant. We take them with ADHD, rheumatoid arthritis, and English as their second language. We take them all, every one. And that, Mr. Vollmer, is why it's not a business, it's a school. It goes on to say an explosion, and in an explosion, all 290 teachers, principals, bus drivers, aides, custodians, secretaries jumped to their feet and yelled, yes, blueberries, blueberries. And I'm here to tell you that we are proud to serve you and our entire learning community. I hope tonight helps you better understand what Holt Public has done and will be doing moving forward as we serve everyone that comes to us. You may or may not know, my name is David Hornick, and I've lived in our community and worked in Holt Public for the past 28 years. I'm a former young fives and kindergarten teacher, high school soccer coach, elementary principal, and now lead learner of this school district, which is also known as the superintendent of schools. In a recent New York Times article, 362 school counselors stated that America's school children's learning loss in the pandemic is not just in reading and math, it's also in social emotional skills. And those skills those are the skills needed to make friends, keep friends, participate in school projects, cope with frustration and other emotions. It should be noted that as a reference point, something we need to continue to be aware of is that in some cases, our students have skipped over crucial years of social and emotional development while grappling with this pandemic. Nearly 94% of the counselors in the New York Times article stated that their students were showing more signs of anxiety and depression than before the pandemic. We have dealt with or are dealing with several serious issues this year. And while the pandemic may have contributed to the dysregulation, so have factors such as the TikTok challenge and other stressors outside of our control. Rather than pretending nothing has happened over the course of the year, Holt Public welcomes you tonight in an effort to build capacity and understanding while hopefully deepening our partnerships with home. Together, as I've said, we are better. To that end, tonight is not about sharing specific information about any student or staff member. I'd like to thank you for submitting questions ahead of time. Many of the questions that have been submitted will be answered within the presentation. However, as we have done in the past, we will have some time near the end of our session for my assistant and the assistant to the Board of Education, Ms. Christine Lopez, to ask me some of the submitted questions, I should say. I apologize ahead of time as we will not have enough time to answer all of the questions. Finally, as a reminder, we do not govern on social media. In an effort to respond to the pandemic in a productive and meaningful way, the district invested in the following. And by the way, this is not an exhaustive list. Okay, so we hired a director of mental health last summer. We also hired a director of diversity, equity, and inclusion last summer. We appointed an inclusion and outreach coordinator. We hired additional social workers. We hired additional school nurses. We have trained nearly or over 100, right around that number, of staff members on what is called youth mental health first aid with the goal of training all 900 Holt Public employees. We hired a restorative justice coordinator for the district. We hired a restorative justice facilitator in every building. We hired additional safety team members. We've been actively recruiting volunteers. In an effort to improve our communication, we have partnered with Byram and Fisk for communication support. We have reproduced our Holt Public hotline flyers to be posted in every classroom. Now, those were there pre-pandemic and things were changed and moved and we took things off the wall, but they are back up across the district. The board adopted our equity-oriented strategic plan, also known as our EOSP, and linked it with the board adopted strategic plan. I would like to point you towards the EOSP goal number 3 and the board goal regarding learning, environment, and culture. At our pre-K through 6th grade level, our adults are learning something called conscious discipline and have been for the last several years. And our entire district has been working on restorative practices, professional development across the district. Again, as you can see, we have anticipated some of the need. However, it was difficult to understand how great the need would be. So to help me out, I would like to know who's with us tonight. So I'm going to move over a Mentimeter activity Please find a device and go to menti.com and use the code 7781-6093. And let's find out who's here. There we go. We'll give it a couple more seconds here. It looks like there are 92 attendees with 3 panelists. So we've had 55 people submit. So we're over half. And I understand you may not have the capacity to do this right now, and we get it. This gives me an idea of who's in attendance, however. The bulk of the people here are parents and guardians. We have some educators on the call, at least 1 student, 8 community members, and someone else who is here, which is wonderful. Keep your device handy. I'd like to know why you're joining us tonight. And this is a short answer. Feel free to please log your responses in. I should also note that this session is being recorded. It will take us a little bit of time to download it from Zoom, and we will get it posted. Safety of our students, good. Lack of support from administration, I understand. Concern for students, yep, this is great. Support for the district and administrators, concerned about the violence, wonderful. Concerned about mental health, you bet. Clarity and information on practices. Concern for my peers and country violence across the country, I understand. Yeah. Concern for students. Better understand the district's leadership response. Concern for students, how to help, wonderful. Yeah. I think we're on track, folks. Thank you. You can keep inputting, and I'm going to get back. I think I've captured a session tonight that will meet the bulk of why you're here. I will just acknowledge that, if I fall short, please feel free to reach out to me. So we've been through that. We've been through that. So I'd like us to take a look back at school discipline. In the 70s and 80s, when I was growing up, students were in school one day and gone the next, never to be seen again. And while I was not a school administrator at the time, a lot has changed since that time. In fact, I believe schools may have contributed to the school to prison pipeline. And today, school discipline and what gets communicated is guided by several different laws, rules, acts, and policies. And let's find out what those may be. So this is a current look at our school discipline. I do want to guide you to the fact that school board policy is live on our website. This is the link that you can't get to, but eventually I hope to share that with you. In short, if you go to our website, you find the Board of Education button at the top and you click policy, it will get you to all of our policies. And now let's dig into this slide. Each school in Holt Public has a handbook that serves as an overview for school expectations. My guess is many of you have seen those as a parent. Oh, by the way, I am a parent, or was. My son graduated yesterday and my daughter graduated 3 years ago. At the secondary level, our schools have a student handbook as well as a student code of conduct that provides an overview of our school expectations. The Michigan Revised School Code also contributes to how school districts such as Holt Public handles discipline. Under the Revised School Code, before suspending or expelling any student under sections 1310, 1311, 1, 1311, 2, or 1311A, the school district shall consider each of the following factors: age, disciplinary history, whether a pupil is a student with a disability, whether a violation or behavior committed by a pupil threatened the safety of other students or staff members, whether restorative practices will be used to address the violation or behavior committed by the pupil, and whether a lesser intervention would properly address the violation or behavior committed by the pupil. The law changes when dealing with a possession of a firearm in a weapons-free zone. Okay, so schools are considered weapons-free zones, and you can jump those 7 factors in most cases. Now, in 2018, Holt Public adopted the Neola School Board policies. And twice a year, we receive policy updates from Neola, and we make adjustments to our policy. So every policy you see on our website will have an adoption date to that. Okay, they're all going to be within the last 5 to 10 years. I will tell you that in the past, policy was very, very old, but we have updated our policy and things are much more current. In most cases, the policy changes are directed by a change in a law or a litigated case across the nation. Behind the Neola policy are several different attorneys working to keep school district policy up to date. Policies 5600, 5605, 5610, 5611, 5771, 5772, and 5780 are a few that contribute to the way we handle our discipline currently. Finally, the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, FERPA, you may have heard that before, states school must have written permission from the parent or eligible student in order to release any information from a student's educational record. Discipline is a part of the educational record. And on a side note, schools may, without consent, provide what is called directory information once the district has informed families about the opt-out process. So annually, you will see in your paperwork that you sign off, part of the opt-out. I also put it in the peak of the week. Again, we try to over-communicate that process. Finally, I have 2 additional points to address on this particular slide. First, I continue to hear concerns about the district, across the district, about our school of choice students and our enrollment process. Our current school board policy states that we are not able to enroll any student that has a suspension within the last 2 years or who has ever been expelled. Okay, so we follow policy, we continue to follow policy, and our current policy states that. The term zero tolerance is also used across our learning community often. In 2016, Governor Snyder abolished the state's zero tolerance policy. As such, the phrase zero tolerance continues to be misunderstood as it relates to schools. When discipline is required, depending on the circumstances, the continuum tends to be quite broad. Our job is to keep students in school and learning to the best of our capacity. And we also have to keep in mind the other students as well. To that end, depending on the circumstances, discipline could range from returning to the classroom immediately to permanent expulsion. Now, it is important to emphasize that we implement restorative practices alongside our typical disciplinary framework. Restorative practices are a proactive approach that focuses on building community and promoting empathy within groups of people, such as students and teachers, so that when conflict arises, we're able to find a way to repair the harm and ideally learn from the conflict. Our restorative practices coordinator shared that one experience that has stuck with him was watching a video that equated restorative practices to the response of a first responder at the scene of a car accident. The video explained that upon arrival, the first responders typically ask if anyone is hurt, evaluate who has the greatest need, and work to support those needs. The focus is on the victim, the person who was harmed initially, and the person who caused the harm as the secondary focus. The restorative practices work to take the perspective into account, to focus on those harmed and what they need to be whole once again, by holding those who caused the harm responsible in a way that is meaningful to those harmed, the community, and themselves. It can be difficult to reorient a lifetime experiences and thinking that focuses on a person who caused the harm and what happens to them, opposed to those who are harmed and need the healing to occur. But we believe the example of the car accident is a real world scenario that allows people to picture why it is important to shift one's focus to a restorative mindset. Now let's discuss a situation where a significant behavior has occurred. Following a report, our administration and staff begins a full investigation. If it is determined that a suspension is required of 10 days or more, a building level review is held. At the building level review, staff as well as the family of the student and the student who demonstrated the significant behavior discuss the circumstances of why they are meeting, what happened, and how it could be prevented in the future. The building level review team then considers the 7 factors discussed in a previous slide and makes a recommendation to the Transportation and Safety Committee. A due process hearing is held with the family and the student with 3 members of the board who are new to the concern. That's part of the due process. The student deserves someone to hear the case who's new. Following the hearing, the board committee makes a recommendation at the next full Board of Education meeting, where the full board eventually makes a decision to suspend, expel, or permanently expel. For students with an IEP or a 504, there are some additional required steps, which is called a manifestation determination review. This review is held to determine whether or not a student's disability contributed to the actions of the student. As you can see, there are many steps to the school discipline continuum. Everyone deserves due process under the current board policy, and during an investigation of a serious incident, students are out on suspension. Here you will find our restorative practices continuum used at the secondary level. You can see that we put a great deal of focus on preventative measures. It is only near the end of the continuum that we become responsive. As a reminder, restorative practices work concurrently with our traditional discipline. And now you can see that all staff that we believe in those preventative measures to build and maintain relationships with and between all students to prevent conflict and harm. That includes classroom teacher and our building behavior, positive behavior intervention and supports team. We have adult mindset and identity, classroom practices, community building, and curriculum, and all of these things that fall underneath. It is here that we move into a responsive model, repairing relationships, resolving conflict, and managing difficulties. Again, we work through I statements, restorative chats, scripted questions, peer mediators, again, working to restore relationships. Often we hold a group or restorative circle. Sometimes that includes a whole class, a mini conference, and what have you. Sometimes there are things called healing circles, class conferences that include scripted questions, often for serious incidents or issues. Again, I would like to remind you, restorative practices work concurrently with traditional discipline. So there is a time where someone could be suspended and may still need to come back through a restorative circle. There continues to be concern in our community that students or staff members, for that matter, can just apologize for a behavior. To date, the Transportation and Safety Committee has held 32 due process hearings required by our policy. Each hearing has resulted in a suspension over 10 days, an expulsion from school, and I should just clarify, a suspension is anything from 1 to 59 days out of school. According to the law, an expulsion is defined as 60 days to 179 days, and a permanent expulsion is 180 school days. Again, I would like to emphasize the fact that our current Transportation and Safety Committee has held 32 due process hearings required by our policy this year. I urge you to listen to the board report each month if you're curious about the process, as the board committee makes recommendations to the full Board of Education the month following each committee hearing. Ms. Lopez, I think it's your turn to come on and we're going to answer some questions. At this point, I would like to welcome Christine Lopez.
Hi, everyone.
Christine is the assistant to the superintendent. In fact, you often hear from Christine initially. I will tell you, Christine often routes concerns to the lowest level of entry. So if you call with a concern about a teacher, we will ask you to go back to that teacher. If you're not able to do so, we'll ask you to go to the building principal. If for some reason that breaks down, she will route you to the curriculum office. Our curriculum directors, Mr. Steve Netzel and Miss Jessica Cotter, oversee our administrators. Steve oversees the PK, pre-kindergarten through 6th grade administrators, and Jessica oversees the secondary administrators. If that breaks down, it's time for me to get involved. And then prior to going to the school board, they would be the step after me. So there are times where, again, a bit misunderstood, someone will reach out and say, you know, Hornak, you have not responded. And I'll own that. There are times where I miss an email and I apologize for that. There are other times where we believe we have routed you to the best possible person to respond to you. And again, I apologize if for some reason you're expecting me and you get someone else. Christine is very handy. She's very in tune with what's happening in the district and welcomes a phone call on a regular basis. So she's very good at that. So
Always happy to help.
Yeah, thank you. Christine also serves as the assistant to the Board of Education. So she has a bifurcated position and she serves us both. So to that end, Christine, I do have a couple more slides to get through. So I'm wondering about 4 or 5 questions and how you feel about that.
I think that's good. And I know that I went through all the questions that came in. The last time I checked, we had 39 folks, I think, and they could put in up to 3 questions. A lot of your presentation covered, and there were some themes. So we've covered a lot of them, but there were a few that I've pulled out to see if we can get some response from you. Cell phones are a problem. Kids should not have them out in class. Has the administration given the okay to support to teachers and made this clear to parents that phones will be taken if not kept put away?
Well, that's a good question. So just prior to the pandemic, Holt Public wrote and implemented an off and away procedure for cell phones. And we were implementing that, and I think it was going very, very well. Again, I referenced that I have a son in the system, or did until yesterday as he graduated. As a consumer, that didn't make him very happy, but he did mention, again, approximately 3 years ago, that he felt like there was more engagement in the classrooms when the cell phones were considered off and away. We understand that cell phones can be a distraction in school. We also understand that prior to the pandemic, the off and away procedure was working fairly well. At this point, we intend to reestablish this procedure across the district this coming fall, but we're going to need your help, folks. Okay, this is really important to us. There are times throughout the day when cell phones can be accessed, but a lot of what's happening in our schools right now tends to be someone texts someone else and says, meet me in the bathroom. Someone texts someone and says, meet me over here. And if we just put the phones off and away, I predict we will have more engagement in our schools. And so we need your support for that. Again, it was working, we think, quite well. Our neighboring districts were potentially, in some cases, replicating our procedure. It's not a policy, our procedure. And we're proud of that, but we're going to need your help to return to that. But we intend to reestablish this procedure in the fall.
All right, our next question. Will you hire more social workers and behavior staff, especially with the steady rising need for mental health and behavioral concerns?
Well, yes, I have some good news. As I mentioned earlier, we hired a director of mental health, and our mental health director, as well as one of our assistant principals, wrote a grant this particular spring dedicated for a short-term solution-focused therapist to address concerns for up to 6 to 12 sessions. This grant is coming with a partnership, or from a partnership, with the Child and Family Charities. Now, I want to set the stage just a little bit more. Our guidance counselors and our current counselors are doing what they can to balance both the academic needs as well as the social emotional needs. This particular health professional will be focused strictly on helping the mental health side of things, anxiety, depression, any other therapy that's needed. In the past, well, let's just face it, we're not set up to do long-term counseling, but I'm grateful for this grant. I'm extremely impressed with the vision of our mental health and director and assistant principal, who really went out searching for someone who can do, while we call it short term, 6 to 12 sessions, and potentially has the relationships in the private sector to hand students off. This will be occurring in our schools. This particular person will be housed at Holt High School, but we plan to adjust their time. So there may be a day of the week that they're in session, like from 7:30 to 2:30 when the kids are there, but there may be a day in the week where they come in at 10 and stay till 5 or something along those lines. So students from other schools can access this person. Again, we're proud of the partnership with the Child and Family Charities. I do have another exciting announcement. We have also recently adopted the Trails program. This is a University of Michigan partnership, and it's called Transforming Research into Action to Improve the Lives of Students. This is a 10-week cognitive behavioral group focused on addressing anxiety and depression. So while we hired additional social workers this year, and we're going to need some time for those folks to be fully realized, with anything, there's an implementation timeline that plays out. Sometimes it takes a little time. I'm proud of the fact that we are adding an additional counselor, as well as adopting the Trails program, which is that 10-week cognitive behavior group focused on addressing anxiety and depression.
Yes, I've signed up to be trained on that. I'm very excited about Trails coming, and I've heard nothing but good things, so that's good for HPS. Next question. Are the cameras in and outside of the buildings operational? Are the cameras outside of the building actively being monitored? If an outsider arrived at the building with weapons, what are the steps that would be taken, and are all staff and students aware of what is expected?
So there's several questions in there. Let me see what I can do to work my way through. I may need you to repeat that. Yes, we have operational internal and external cameras at the secondary level, and all of our schools, PK through 12th grade, have a camera at each entryway monitoring the front doors. Our recordings are held for 30 days. Now, if we find that there's something we need to, keep for longer, we can snip that part out and put it on a shared drive or some type of jump drive. With that, we will be expanding the number of cameras across the district with our future bond improvements. And again, I'd like to remind everyone that all of our schools are locked during the school day, and members of the public must be buzzed in and signed in to access the building. Our bond will be providing each building with a secure entry where members of the public will be buzzed in to kind of a holding area. And once they are cleared to access the building, they'll be buzzed into the rest of the building. While we do have a buzzer to get you into the building right now, in many cases, the initial buzzer entry allows access to the rest of the building. So can you repeat the final question there, Mrs. Lopez?
I definitely will. And then in all honesty, what I'm going to say is the next question, actually, I think will help us answer the last part. The last part of that question was, if an outsider arrived at the building with weapons, what are the steps that will be taken, and are all staff and students aware of what is expected? The next question that we pulled out here, do we participate in any programs like the Sandy Hook Promise that teaches and arms educators and students with knowledge and identifying threats and threatening behavior?
Okay, I think I have it here. So new this fall, the district will be partnering with an organization called I Love You Guys, and it's called the I Love You Guys Foundation, which is a school safety program. This program marries well with our current Run, Hide, Fight, or I like to say Run, Hide, Defend program that is used across the county. So the Ingham County Schools prescribe to Run, Hide, Fight. I Love You Guys is a training, and it's a foundation. I urge you to take a look at it, that is built to ensure everyone knows exactly what to do. If we go back to the first, the final question of the last series of questions, our current protocols would be to, of course, call 911 immediately, inform the inside of the building to take cover, prepare, to run or fight if for some reason the building is breached. So I'm hopeful that the threat would stay outside. We don't have to look very far, into the news to see that there's a lot of violence going on across the nation, especially in Texas, a couple weeks ago. Just as a side note, we practice drills annually. We have to do, I think, 2 or 3 tornado drills. I believe 2 safety drills where we're either running, hiding, or fighting, or defending, and I believe 6 fire drills annually. So there's a lot of drilling that's going on, and we've asked our faculty and staff as well as our administrators to practice each of those drills with fidelity. So.
Yes, and I would also add to that, Dr. Hornick, anytime someone in the district dials 911, my phone is notified. I know immediately that someone has dialed 911, and I know from what number 911 was called, as do some other key members in our district, so that we could always get help. So I think that's an important thing to say. I hope that's okay.
I think it's great. It also should be noted that we follow up on every 911 call.
Absolutely. We have a protocol that we follow.
You bet. Yeah. And so if need be, we deploy to a situation. In many cases, it could be a student having a medical emergency. And again, in those cases, for the dignity of the student, we ask that all other students stay in their classroom. It could even transcend or cross over a passing period, but it's important for, again, our students who are, in the middle of some type of medical emergency to have the space that they need, as well as the staff to support them, rather than being, faced with peers and or other people in the hallway or wherever they may be. So.
All right. The last question that I have is, can we have an update on the results from the SWOT analysis, the next SWOT? I know you'll probably fill us in on what that stands for. SWOT analysis sent from Dr. Hornick to the district in November of 2021.
You bet. So I'm going to try to do this a little bit from memory, but I will commit to sharing a little bit more with this learning community who's here, as well as our greater learning community. So in February-ish, may have been January, may have been March, I shared the preliminary results of the SWOT analysis with the Board of Education. And I can tell you that we had somewhere in the 350 participants, 350 participants shared input online. We did have a public session for face-to-face, and one person came to share some thoughts. The bulk of the individuals responding were parents and guardians, with staff and student making up the next largest chunk of people who responded. I believe that, just kind of going from memory here, but I had studied the daylights out of this. So the strengths, according to those who responded, approximately 350 people, strengths would be staff, strengths would be communication, but I also want to acknowledge, I'm pretty sure that a weakness was a communication as well. I believe that the public appreciates our diversity, our equity-oriented strategic plan. Those were some of the strengths that I can recall. In terms of weaknesses, these are the concerns. So SWOT is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So weaknesses, there was a lot of information submitted and concerns regarding poor behaviors and bullying and lack of accountability, or perceived lack of accountability. I think until you sit through a session like something like we're doing tonight, schools are, and we all went to them. We all went to school, and so we think we know how they function. And they've changed a lot in my 28-year career. So, but there is a perceived lack of accountability. There's a concern for staff and student safety. I saw it again tonight. I'm glad we're here tonight. Okay, we're leaning into this. Again, I recall communication being something that was an area of concern. I'm sure there was some other stuff. In terms of opportunities, that would be the O. There is this thought that we need to have like firmer discipline. And I think that that also contributed to why we're here tonight. An opportunity. Quite a few people thought metal detectors would be something that Holt Public should put in. There was, I mean, I'm just going from memory right now, but I believe that there was some things regarding staff training and like a quick alert system. You know, when we were dealing with some things in the fall, we had a hard time getting the messaging out immediately. And a quick little placeholder would have been something that we're working towards that would have been handy in the fall. You know, hey, Holt High is in a medical lockdown, or hey, we're in a lockdown investigating ... More information will come soon. What we realized in the fall is that you know, timely and accurate information is tricky to do at the same time. Okay, so if we get something out too quick, it may be inaccurate. If we wait too long, it certainly will be accurate, but someone else is going to tell our story. So this is a real tricky one, but there's a true opportunity in my mind for us to figure out a quick alert system for next school year. And I know we're looking at a more robust app, and that might have push notifications with it. So stay tuned on that. The T in the SWOT analysis is threats. And I will tell you that, I mean, I'm going from memory, but I believe social media was one of the threats that this learning community put forward. I believe they put forward bullying as, you know, a threat. And again, something about the lack of accountability. I'm pretty sure those things were on there. So, Mrs. Lopez, I think we should transition back to the slide deck. I know there are some other questions that you may have, but I worry about staying to our timeline. So,
Good.
All right, thank you for asking those questions. And public, thank you for submitting those questions. And I understand that not all questions were answered. And I will tell you that we hope by the time this session is over that the majority of the questions that were submitted were answered. But I'm real, okay? We're probably not going to hit every single one. And you know, I apologize for that, but I hope you also understand that we're trying to capture as much as we can.
I do want to just quickly say, as I perused, the reason there were a number of questions that we cannot answer. So there were people wanting specific information about a specific incident. And we, as you mentioned earlier, are not able to share that information. So I want the public to know, since I'm the person who went through and tried to pull those out. Unfortunately, the answers that you're giving are going to have to be enough, because that's all of the information we can provide. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we're moving on. Appreciate that and appreciate your help. So what are the next steps for Holt Public Schools? Okay, so I think we have about 3 more slides. So that's the short term. I would like you to know that I believe there is a need for a more regular behavior, discipline, and policy summit. I think we should consider doing it maybe 4 times a year, maybe 3 times a year, but certainly the next one needs to occur August of 2022. And I believe that there's merit in having it during that time of year to welcome our new families to the district, share our expectations wide and far, and ask for the help that we need. Jamie Vollmer said, schools cannot do it alone. We wholeheartedly believe in that. We need you. I urge you to listen into the Board of Education monthly Transportation and Safety Committee report. You will hear the final disciplinary recommendations and final determinations from the school board. Annually, we give this Board of Education the Holt Public Bullying Report. It's a summary of activity. We're in the process of creating a QR code or another discrete way to report concerns to complement our Holt Public Hotline. So back in 2016 or 17, I'm not really sure what year, but we created a Holt Public Hotline that rings during the school day to this office. If we're not at our desk, it automatically rings to okay to say. Again, it is automatically forward after hours. So if you were to call our line and we're not here, it does end up with a responsive person on the back end. But we've learned from our students that, picking up the phone and making a phone call is not ideal, especially in times of a crisis or a concern. And there needs to be another discreet way to report. That could be scanning a QR code, or it could be pressing a button on our website or something along those lines. We are working on a complement to our Holt Public Hotline. We need to continue to recruit volunteers. Okay, one of the things that the SWOT analysis said way back, was we want to help. How do we volunteer? This has been a bit of a slow process. While we immediately started asking for volunteers, we went from 12 to 17 to 22 to somewhere in the 30s, and we currently sit at 51 people who have asked for the paperwork to become a volunteer. We're not asking you to volunteer 5 days a week, 7.5 hours a day. We're really just asking you to find time in your work week, your work month, or your year where you could spend time in our buildings supporting. A background check is required. And again, that is no cost to you, but we continue to actively recruit volunteers. We are recommitting to teaching behavior expectations. Okay, so pre-pandemic, this was a thing that we put a lot of time into. Post-pandemic, we do teach behavior expectations, but we need to recommit to doing so. And starting in the fall, spending a great deal of time. I'm going to tell you just a little bit of a story. As a brand new teacher in 1994, I would say line up at the door. Mind you, I was teaching kindergartners. And what you're visioning right now in your mind is exactly what happened. Kids ran to the door. And I kept asking my colleague, how do you get your kids to line up so neatly? And my colleague said, you teach them. You teach them how to line up. And I'm like, what in the world? Kids know how to line up. Sure, they know how to line up, but they know how they want to be first. So you need to teach the behavior expectations and set the protocols that the kids follow day after day after day. So we need to recommit to teaching our behavior expectations. We also need to reinforce appropriate behaviors. When we see someone doing the right thing, you know how great it feels when someone sends a note to say, way to go, you're doing the right thing. We also need to do that to our kids. We need to find them and catch them doing the right thing. That's critical to our future. Again, I just want to highlight 2 of our leaders wrote a grant for a dedicated short-term solution-focused therapist to address concerns for up to 6 to 12 sessions. This is pretty powerful stuff. This is with a partnership with the Child and Family Charities. We have recently adopted, and we're going through the training right now, the TRAILS program, Transforming Research into Action to Improve the Lives of Students. This is a 10-week cognitive behavioral group focused on addressing anxiety and depression in partnership with the University of Michigan. I'd also like to note that part of that SWOT analysis was a recommendation of a formation of a student advisory committee. And I'm proud to say that our students who serve the Board of Education at the board table have created that student advisory committee. And so while it is just late forming right now, moving forward, we have the committee in place, and those students will be reporting to the 2 board members, student board members, and the superintendent of schools. So we can get the straight shot. What's happening in school? How's it going? What's working and what's not on a more regular basis? The student voice is very important to us. So as we come to a close, and there's a couple more slides, I will say, I've been asked by many families if they could share testimony. Why Holt Public? And families have reached out to ask if they could post a response to a prompt, why Holt Public? And the answer is, of course. If you'd like to write your testimony or send a short video, Holt Public will begin to showcase the testimony we receive. Please send your submissions to me, and that would be my email. And please note, not all submissions will be featured. Okay, so they can't be too long, and they certainly need to promote the district and what have you. But again, there is some call out in our public for us to continue to showcase the good and why families are choosing to raise their students here. So we're going to give you the opportunity to submit if you wish. And then finally, we would like to know if we've met your expectations this evening. Please give us your feedback by going to https://gohps.net/June6 with 6 being a number, feedback. I'm going to leave this up for just a moment. Together we are better, and we appreciate you joining us tonight. Our goal was to do this within 59 minutes. Looks like it's 56 minutes. So, folks, thanks for joining us tonight. I hope this has been informational, impactful, and that you're willing to partner with us moving forward, because together we are better, and it will take each of us to make a difference for all of us.